morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m. Good but already. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech, and I am Eagle Falcon. Hopefully today we'll stay within 1 hour. No promises though. But with CES finally being done, wrapped up, and no more tech outlets giving brain-addled awards, we should just be able to move on through the tech news, not look at anything stupid, and not wonder, why did this most generic laptop in the world get all the awards when it is in fact the most generic thin and light laptop? Or why did a covert discrete breast pump get 2 awards? Or why is the Verge still considered respectable after making a Best Failure award? Unironically and unsarcastically. Well, taking all those questions aside, we can move on to other questions. Such as, well, this little article here. First off, let's talk about this app for a minute. This app, it's called Meitu. Meitu is kinda, sorta a Snapchat-like app or an Instagram sort of thing. It's a lot like a lot of other apps that just have a whole lot of various face filters and augmented anything apps, and it really just, in the grand scheme of things, is just yet another one of those apps that does automated Photoshop and just brings new horrors to your mind. Meitu, for those who don't know, as I just said, it's a Snapchat-like app, but its primary feature that was just recently released is making the person you're taking a picture of look more anime-like, is what I'm going to call for it. It's a Chinese app, and it does this by making your eyes more exaggerated, adding various like sakura leaves filters, making your skin lighter, adding like a little blush under your eyes, that sort of thing. And in the grand scheme of things, just brings terrible nightmares. Pretty much like every other Instagram filter-like thing. But that's not the real story here. No, the real story is not the horrors that exist at the top of the app, such as trying to make Macho Man Randy Savage look adorable, or make Donald Trump look adorable, or pick anyone. There is not a single person on this planet, I don't care who you mention, that's going to look more adorable because of this app. It is going to look horrifying. Or really hilarious. No, the real horror of this app is actually what's going on underneath the code. And yes, this is once again Eagle starting another Eagle Eyes on Tech with a public service announcement. Because in the code of this app, there's not 1, not 2, but 3 chunks of code skimming your phone for a colossal amount of personal data, which is then being sent up to their servers. I'm not making this up. And here's the best part. The Ars Technica article discussed that it's only the Android version that has this problem. Oh no. Multiple other sources, including CNET, have confirmed that the iOS version also does this massive data grab, which is actually against Apple's terms of service. So if you have this app on iOS, expect it to vanish from the store soon. Because this is clearly an oversight on Apple's side. That this app with massive amounts of data skimming got through the App Store in the first place. And, I mean... So, here's the bottom line. If you are one of these silly, silly people that is using Meitu on your personal phone, whether it's Android or iOS, delete the app. The only time you should be using this app, if you have to make horrific Photoshop monstrosities automatically, should be on a tablet or any other sort of Android or iOS device that has no compromising data on it. Not even an email account. Because it can scan for that. Your data then will be mined, and it will be used for, best case scenario, targeted advertising, or worse, anything else. Now to answer some questions in the chat. We're currently recording a podcast. We're not going to be playing Jackbox right now. We're currently recording a tech podcast. That is in fact why the title of the stream is a tech podcast. And of course, Unjust Banana in the chat also points out, just buy a blue phone. It won't bother asking for permission. Or, if you get a blue phone in the first place, it'll just do it. So, that concludes our public service announcement for the day. Uninstall Meitu. First off, because you'll be a better person without the app. And then second, because it is stealing all the data. All of it. Now let's move over to the story that will never, ever, 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 ever die. Because nobody is allowing this stupid story to die. Literally the entire tech... Now, I should be fair, actually. In this particular case, this article actually does actually inform us that we actually are going to get some real information involving this stupid story that will never die. The story I'm referring to, if you somehow don't know, is in regards to the exploding combustible phones that is the Note 7. For the past, what feels like 27 years now, the tech news has been talking about the Note 7, the phone that launched late last year, which was built with a design flaw that caused the phone to combust or explode. Now, there has been a lot of rolling theories. Early thoughts was that the power relay system was putting in too much voltage, causing the phone batteries to expand too much and eventually reach critical temperature and explode. Other reports later on said that there wasn't enough space in the phone because they're trying to make it watertight. Which then caused the battery, when it does expand slightly, to just start breaking the phone and cause volatility and explode. Samsung has yet to actually announce anything regarding the phone. Samsung has been working on an internal investigation. They have not been talking about it at all. It has been now announced, unfortunately for my timing, that Samsung will report to the media next week, Monday, what they discovered regarding the Note 7. So I guess now would be the perfect time for me, now only having 2 days before the announcement, to try and guess, what is Samsung gonna find? My original guess is gonna be the first one. The first reports made the most sense. That the internal voltage regulators gave too much power to the battery, causing it to expand too much, combust, and explode. It just makes the most sense to me. The theory about there being too little space for the battery would then result in the internal plastic just breaking under the pressure. I don't think that would cause the batteries to catch fire and combust. More than likely, it's going to turn out to be some third thing that nobody's thought of. That's what I'm really willing to bet. It's like something with the screen or something crazy like that. I mean, the too little space for the battery, I gotta think back to the original MacBook Pros. Way back in 2006. That was when Apple was first moving off of the PowerPC processors to Intel processors. That caused the death of the PowerBook and the birth of the MacBook Pro. When the MacBook Pros first launched, and granted this was only the 15 and 17-inch variations, there wasn't a 13-inch MacBook Pro yet, the batteries were notorious for swelling and expanding because of the power regulators being off. It was putting too much juice into the battery, which then caused the batteries to expand. In very rare scenarios, did the battery actually catch fire. But what happened instead was that it would just keep swelling and swelling and swelling and swelling until the batteries ended up being close to 2.5 to 3 times the size of the actual packaging. And what happened 9 times out of 10 was that the locking mechanism failed and the batteries would just unset and disconnect themselves from the power. In rare scenarios, the battery would swell and crack the motherboard. Now, in Samsung's case, I think the voltage is much higher, causing a lot more heat to be generated, which then causes the cells to combust. For the too little space for the battery to expand theory, I've seen lithium polymer batteries in the past break through magnesium alloy and aluminum to just occupy more space. I can't imagine it would cause instability to the point of combusting. Now, granted, That was back in 2006. This is now 2017. Or 2016 in the case of the Note 7. And like I said, that's my guess that it's a voltage problem. I am willing to probably bet against that and say that it's some other third thing that I and nobody else has thought of yet. But I guarantee you, when it is announced, some idiot out from under some hole would say, "I knew it! I knew it was the home button the whole time!" And all we're going to do is just say, "No, you didn't, idiot." Unjust Banana is now switching his guess from Too Little Space for the Battery to Gremlins. That would be impressive if it was Gremlins. Tiny little gremlins inside the phone causing him to expand. Although, Unjust also did bring up another thing. I couldn't find the article about it, but CNET did have a video discussing it. And it's regarding Verizon and how they're handling the Note 7. Verizon has confirmed reports that there are still thousands of Note 7s accessing their networks. I have no idea who these people are. That, first off, did not get the memo from this story that nobody will shut up about, including myself, admittedly, that the Note 7 is basically a brick of C4. But that, or knows that it's a brick of C4 and just like, well, mine still works. Doody-doody-doo. I don't think I need to repeat it again, but for the love of God, if you have one of these phones, turn it in. Yeah, maybe you're one of the lucky ones that has one of these that doesn't have the flaw in it. Maybe. You really want to take that chance? You really want to take the chance that it's going to combust in your pocket? But anyway, back to the point. Verizon, first off, did push out the update that supposedly blocks the Note 7 from being able to charge anymore. But in addition, Verizon is now blocking calls from Note 7s and rerouting them to customer support. That part I agree with. To say, please, for the love of God, turn in your grenade. Here's a detail that Verizon is doing that I don't agree with. Verizon is rerouting all calls to customer support. This is including emergency calls. This is including calls to 911. Look, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the other guy. I'm going to pretend for a minute that I had a Note 7. I'm going to pretend for a minute that I am a stubborn old goat and that my Note 7 hasn't exploded yet. And I have come to the conclusion that mine's never going to explode. I've had it now for 3 months. This whole story's been going on, and mine has yet to even get warm. Okay? I'm going to pretend that. And then I got mugged. I'm in front of wherever. I'm in front of we'll say a Dollar Tree. I'm in front of a Dollar Tree and I get mugged. I reach down and I have to call 911. I am going to be super, super, super pissed if when I'm trying to contact the police about being chased down by muggers, that I get Verizon customer support instead of the frickin' police. That is super, super uncool. And as much as I have to agree that the Note 7 situation is unique, and it is outside of the realm of the norm, and nobody's come up with scenarios of what happens when a major company releases an exploding phone, I gotta say that don't reroute every other call, but don't reroute 911. People are going to call 911 when they have to. That part, I think, is super uncool. And look, the only reason why I say the Dollar Tree, because now chat is starting to declare me as hating Dollar Tree. I only say the Dollar Tree because when I was back in college, I did get mugged in front of a Dollar Tree. That's just the first thing that came to my head because it's something that did happen to me. I have nothing against Dollar Tree. I just have something against that particular Dollar Tree, mainly because it's in a really scummy neighborhood. Which actually is more than I have something against the neighborhood. I'm getting way off track. In any case, next Monday, we're going to have words as to what is going on with the Note 7. Actually, Unjust makes a good point. Redirecting 911 calls does sound pretty illegal. That's something to pay attention to. That could be an impending lawsuit if that actually does happen. Now, it could also be some misreporting. If it is misreporting, blame CNET. Because I, for one, am getting damn sick of all of these news sources claiming we're the legitimate ones, we're the trusted source, and then reporting on BS, which is becoming more and more and more common. Let's talk about dead technology. So, let's go back in time for a minute. It's now the year 2014. The biggest push in the TV world that is just hitting is 3D. This ancient, archaic movie technology that was dumped long ago using those plastic red and blue glasses that barely worked. They stopped being used an eternity ago. But then the TV companies, I'm not even sure who actually came up with the technology. But everyone's push was to find out that with a slight alteration of the technology, we can make those who have perfect 20/20 eyesight see 3D flawlessly, as long as they don't think about it too hard. 3D was such a hard push. Every TV had it. Every single TV had it. It was the newest thing to try and get people to dump their TVs, which there was almost no need to. Everything had 3D. Projectors had 3D. TVs, of course, had 3D. There were various channels were trying to push 3D content over the air, over cable. 3D Blu-rays were all the rage. In 2015, the push even became harder. Even Nintendo got on the bandwagon by having their latest handheld console have 3D out of the box without glasses. It was amazing. It was a miracle of technology. Granted, the technology turned out to be, for about half the population, a headache generator. But it didn't stop anyone. No, we have to develop gaming monitors for higher refresh rates so that polarizing can work there. 3D gaming will be a huge thing. Fast forward to now. When was the last time that 3D was mentioned? You can't think of it, can you? Besides just now, when I talked about 3D TVs, when was the last time you heard 3D mentioned? Well, Samsung and LG are dropping 3D support from their new TVs. Finally, huzzah, huzzah. In the grand scheme of things, there were only two kinds of people who loved 3D. The TV industry and home theater enthusiasts. You might hear it occasionally on a monitor. Occasionally mentioned as, oh, this thing can do it. But in the grand scheme of things, the TVs just can't handle doing 3D and fit in newer technologies. Here's something to consider. The way modern 3D works with active polarization is that the TV has to, or whatever display, has to make two images and stack them on top of each other in such a manner that the active polarizing glasses will have one lens pick up one image and the other lens pick up the other, giving the illusion of depth. This is becoming extremely hard at higher resolutions. If you think back to PC gaming and console gaming for that fact, but this debate is much more relevant in PC gaming because you are always aware of what the hardware is inside. It's nothing against console gamers. Console gamers, you just go, it's an Xbox One or it's a PS4. The PS4 can do this, but the Xbox One can't. In the PC gaming world, editing your settings is one of the first things you think about when you're playing a game. Can my rig play Overwatch at 4K? Can it play at 60 frames per second with the settings cranked up at high? Resolution is the first question that is always asked. Because when push comes to shove, let's say you're building a new rig right now. If you pop in a GTX 1060 or an RX 480 and your goal is to just play at 1080p, done. That rig will play whatever you want at 1080p. What about 4K? Not unless you crank the settings way down. Now, it's different in the TV world, but they're running into a very similar problem. It's difficult for the TV to do 4K at 48 frames per second for your high-def movie. They're running into bandwidth problems to do it in the first place, let alone to do it twice. So, when push comes to shove, what do? Do you do 4K? Which is all the new hype? Or do you do 3D? The technology that 70% of everyone never wanted or asked for in the first place. Well, here's a toast to you, population. We did it. Ding dong. 3D is finally dead. No more stupid glasses coming with your TVs. No more having to worry about can I watch this movie with this friend or whatnot. Huzzah, huzzah. The stupid, unwanted gimmick that nobody asked for is finally dead. Rest in peace, 3D. You won't be missed. Now, hopefully, I say 3D is dead, but I just thought about something. What about movie theaters? Maybe that won't die yet. Hopefully it will, though. Oh, well. When push comes to shove, really, I'm fine without 3D. I'm fine with my movies at 1080p. And really, I'm not going to care about 4K unless it's on some massive 100-inch screen where the pixels are so blown up that it might benefit from 4K. But 4K on a 24-inch screen, 27-inch screen, or even, what size is my TV over there? 37? Even 4K on that TV is just kind of, why bother? Actually, what resolution is my TV? It might only be 720. Who cares? That actually does bring up another thing, too. We are way too focused nowadays on the resolutions on our various screens. Which, actually, again, just ends up being Apple's fault. Because for the longest time, Apple was just getting away with doing 1280 by 720, 1440 by 900, and 1920 by 1080 on their MacBooks. And even then, it's just the bare minimum getting by. It was kind of comical. Then all of a sudden, one day, Apple's just like, we're gonna give you all the pixels. All of them. And then suddenly they were giving us resolutions that were so crazy high your eyes couldn't even see the pixels. And it was just kind of okay. But in the end, I mean, just stick with 1080. I see nothing wrong with 1080. But again, unless it's on a giant screen. As far as gaming goes, as Unjust Banana just says in the chat, frame rate is much more important. Much more important. Which is why I need to upgrade my graphic card. But in any case, I want to talk a little bit about hardware. With Kaby Lake now pretty much being done, Kaby Lake being the newest Intel processor, it's now done. It's finally out. We're finally getting our hands on it. And at the same time, Intel's now moved on and working on Cannon Lake, which will most likely be another 2% performance improvement. Well, now every single motherboard manufacturer is now coming up with their newest, latest, and greatest motherboards. One of my go-to boards is one by Asus that was originally called the Sabertooth. The reason I kept going to this board is because it had a decent amount of features. It was well constructed. It looked a lot more fierce than it had any right to be. But most importantly, the motherboard came with a redonkulous 6-year warranty. And usually by the time 6 years is up, you're contemplating whether your 6-year-old machine is kind of due to be replaced. And usually the motherboards would be anywhere between $150 to $200. Well, Asus now has given a sneak peek of their Sabertooth replacement. The motherboard is called the TUF Z270 Mark I. And much like the Sabertooth, it doesn't look like any other motherboard. This thing still has its very odd-looking metallic alloy shielding over a decent chunk of the motherboard. This one actually didn't cover the whole board like the previous ones used to. They still put military S camo on chunks of it for no adequately explored reason. They put a shielding on the back. But the things that kind of stand out here are a couple of them. First off, this board now supports what Asus is calling Asus Aura Sync. Asus Aura Sync, for those who don't know, is Asus's attempt to allow the homebrew system builder turn their rig into a light show, just like your Alienware or now your Razer computers. I am still extremely indifferent about this. So now there's a bunch of lights on it. And unfortunately, as a result, that has now made this formerly pretty nice, cost-effective motherboard with a crazy warranty on it, now makes the motherboard $240, which is definitely puts it into that premium category as opposed to a really nice buy. The other thing that really annoys me about this particular motherboard is the I/O choices on the back. The ports on the back, we have your standard analog audio, completely ready for surround sound, if you, for whatever reason, are doing that. Optical audio, a USB 3.1 port, two USB 3.0 ports, 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, a USB Type-C connector that I am having a very hard time from the article determining if that is Thunderbolt 3 or not, a DisplayPort and HDMI for the integrated motherboard, a BIOS reset button in the back, that's actually very common for the Asus motherboards. So in case you overclock and accidentally brick the board, you can just hit that, and bam, you're back to your overclock's reset, and you don't have to worry about bricking your stuff from doing a stupid overclock. But here's the part that's baffling to me. In 2017, this $240 motherboard has 5 USB 2.0 ports. Why? Why are there so many USB 2.0 ports? Why are there USB 2.0 ports, period? The thing that really annoys me about this board, it's okay. It's a premium board. You want a premium price for your premium board. I get that. I still enjoy the days where I could have gotten a premium board from Asus at a mainstream price. I can be a little mopey about that. But in the grand scheme of things, the warranty and the price justifies itself. But there's only 3 USB 3.0 ports. My current rig, which is from 2010, has 2 USB 3.0 ports. I'm sorry, 2011. I forgot that thing runs Westmere, not... regardless, I'm getting off track. My rig from 6 years ago has almost the same number of USB 3.0 ports as this premium top-tier Asus motherboard. I don't even know what to say to that. I'm more disappointed than anything. Now, granted, looking at a closer picture of the board, you can see there is at least one is there really only one? There's one USB 3.0 add-in point to hook up USB... No, there's 2. There are 2 USB 3.0 hookup ports on the motherboard. So if your case does have USB 3.0s, you can add double in that way. So you could add more in the back theoretically. There's also a really weird PCI Express slot on the bottom. What is that? on the very bottom, out of position of all the other PCI Express slots, it looks like there's another PCI Express 1X slot, but the notch is in the wrong spot. I have to do more research on that. That's weird. My final point is just, look, if you're going to charge a premium price, for the love of God, give me the power. You can do it. I know you can do better than this, Asus. Let's just move on. I'm just getting ranty on that. Unjust asks, are there USB 3 powered and data monitors? You mean like screens, or you mean something to monitor their status? No, regardless. Let's talk for a moment about this article from PC Perspective. Now, to answer, he asks displays. I'm sure there are. I don't know, actually. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any. But in any case, this article from PC Perspective, let's move on. This is actually one of the questions that I get asked all the time. The main reason I get asked this sort of thing all the time is because I was a computer refurbisher. In fact, I still have connections to get old off-leased computers. That's where I got my Z800, was from that same place. And next to that, I've got a Dell Optiplex 3020 that I'm probably going to turn into a low-end gaming rig, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it after that. So I'm well familiar with the power of processors from generation to generation. And for the past few years now, each Intel upgrade, each new processor, was only a little faster than the previous one. Ever since about Sandy Bridge. There's a few huge jumps in recent history. I mean, first you had the dark ages of the net burst processors, the Pentium 4s, which just continued to increase power consumption drastically while providing very little benefit in the grand scheme of things. It was a flawed architecture from the get-go. Then the core architecture came. The core solos, the core duos, which drastically improved net burst. And then very shortly after that, Core 2 came in. Core 2 was again another massive jump. Core was roughly 30% faster than the highest end Pentium 4 and consumed 30% of the power roughly. Don't quote me on that, but this is all rough guesses. Then Core 2 came out, increased the power consumption a little, increased the performance by nearly double. Then the next big jump after that was Nehalem, the first Core i7. That introduced a 50% jump from Core 2. Then after Nehalem came Linfield, which introduced the Core i3, Core i5s, and new Core i7s in the mainstream. After that came Sandy Bridge, the second generation core processors. This introduced a 25% jump from Linfield. A massive jump. In processor terms, anyway. Nowhere near as massive as Nehalem's jumps, or Core's jumps, or Core 2's jumps, which also had internal code names, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. But ever since Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge is about a 3% improvement. Then Haswell was about another 4% improvement. Broadwell, a 2% improvement. Then Skylake, another 3% improvement. And now Cabby Lake, another 2% improvement. Really, the only upgrades there were in each of these processors was power consumption improvements and support of newer technologies. Supporting PCI Express 3.0. Upgrading to DDR4 memory. Or, as I discovered the hard way, supporting technologies like Intel's RealSense cameras. That didn't start until Haswell. So PC Per asks the question, are you okay? Are you still fine sitting back on Sandy Bridge? Or should you make the jump down to Cabby Lake? And when push comes to shove, the answer comes down to what you're doing and what your current rig is. If you're doing professional applications, you're talking about roughly a 30% improvement jumping from Sandy to Cabby. So you could justify it. It might be worth it. But as far as gaming goes, gaming doesn't tax the CPU nearly as much as you'd think. CPU plays a factor, don't get me wrong. It definitely plays a factor, especially if you're streaming. But there, a graphic card upgrade makes much more sense. It just does. Now, the article does talk about if you're gaming with no dedicated GPU. If you're gaming on an Intel processor, either you're doing some very unique emulation for lower end games, or you're playing something older, or actually I found out certain games actually do play on an integrated Intel better than they do on a NVIDIA one. Case in point, and you've noticed this on my Jackbox streams, Jackbox plays much better on a cruddy integrated Intel than it does on my massively overpowered GTX 780. It was blatantly apparent last night when I was playing the game for a party. Jackbox would stutter when coming up to certain cutscenes on the GTX 780. You'd hear the sound of the explosion at the end of Trivia Murder Party, and the explosion wouldn't actually happen until like a second after the fact. And that could be a driver issue. Unjust just said that it's possible. I'm actually not sure if Unjust is saying it sarcastically or not. But Intel does have the best compatibility for older games. So there could be a scenario where you are gaming on Intel, but let's be honest, nobody is playing Overwatch on just their Core i7. Nobody is. If you are, what is wrong with you? The point I'm making is this. The jump to from Sandy to Cabby might be worth it. But unless you're doing absurdly high-end stuff, it's not necessary. Though I guess it actually also does bring up the question, should you jump on board Cabby if you're on AMD currently? To which I'd say the answer is yeah, probably. Primarily because, I'm not sure if you realize this, but I was actually in a stream. When was that? It was earlier this week, where the streamer admitted he was using the old AMD Bulldozer 8-core processor. And he said it was limiting his graphic card. One of the reasons it's limiting his graphic card is because that old processor doesn't support newer graphic cards. Even though that processor is still sold new, that thing is archaic. It's still on DDR3 memory. It may, in fact, only still support PCI Express 2. And that in itself could be a huge bottleneck. In addition to anything else within the chipset that's a bottleneck. Which also just stresses how much I want AMD to not, under any circumstances, screw up Ryzen. Ryzen has to dig them out of this slump. It just has to. That is the only way that AMD has a future in the CPU market. Hands down, no questions asked. Without it, AMD is just a graphic card company. And if they perform like they did in 2016 in the future, they're not going to be much of that either. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you all for listening to me. Please do follow me here on Podbean, or if you're watching this on YouTube, take care, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Rest well. See you next time.